This model is also known as the reproductive potential hypothesis, which maintains that lifespan regulation has evolved in such a way as to maximize individual reproductive success, and research has indeed shown that women who bear children later or simply bear more children experience enhanced longevity. The benefits of regular sex and childbearing seem to be backed up by laboratory research from Dr. Michael Rose, who explained his theories on the evolution of aging to me at a cocktail party at the Ancestral Health Symposium. You'll find a link to his website at boundlessbook.com/19. Dr. Rose proposed that aging is not a positively selected, programmed death process and has not evolved for the good of the species, as many would think. Rather, aging exists because natural selection is weak and ineffective at maintaining survival, reproduction, and cellular repair as we enter old age. In a paper published in Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society B, he described how senescence, or age-related deterioration, is detrimental to reproductive success. The damage that occurs during aging clearly shortens our lifespan, but longevity can also be shaped by selection for an increased number of what are called lifetime reproductive events, or the number of times you reproduce or attempt to reproduce. In his book, Does Aging Stop?, Rose suggested that aging can indeed stop or plateau in the later stages of life, pointing to the demographic data in his large-scale fruit fly experiments as well as data on humans, both of which support the hypothesis that acceleration in death rates can halt in later life. While Rose had plenty of tips for enhancing this plateau, including the controversial idea that grain and agriculture consumption could accelerate age-related damage, one of his more potent suggestions was to have plenty of children, and plenty of sex early in life, and continue to have children as late as possible, or at least to engage in frequent sexual intercourse to as ripe an age as possible. For multiple reasons, I'm a fan of this idea, although I don't see any issues with using contraception so that you don't have dozens of children running around your house, which I suspect might trigger a stress-related law of diminishing returns when it comes to longevity. The quite possibly fabled but intriguing Li Qingyan, who purportedly lived to the ripe old age of 256, was said to be a much-loved figure in his community, marrying 23 times and fathering over 200 children. If it turns out that the story of Yen is true, he may be the best example of the fact that maintaining reproductive usefulness with age could be an excellent idea indeed. Undoing the damage of smoking. The negative effects of smoking are well known, and it's therefore not surprising that one feature of blue zones is a lack of smoking. Downsides to smoking include habit formation from the effects of nicotine on the central nervous system, withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, irritability, depression, headaches, and sleep problems when you try to quit, emphysema, the irreversible destruction of the air sacs in your lungs, chronic bronchitis, the permanent inflammation in the lining of the breathing tubes of the lungs, lung cancer, the constriction and damage of blood vessels which can lead to peripheral artery disease, hypertension, a condition of chronically elevated blood pressure, increased risk of stroke. If you have been smoking, the good news is that much of the damage can be reversed. The first thing to do is to stock up on supportive nutrients and supplements for the moment you quit. When you quit smoking, your adrenal glands, which secrete anti-stress hormones, must adapt to the lack of nicotine and other addictive chemicals. You can support your adrenals with adaptogenic herbs or supplements such as St. John's wort or ginseng. Research has shown you can minimize the damage to your arteries by taking a taurine supplement once a day for 2 months. Since smoking also damages skin collagen and elastin, eat a diet rich in proanthocyanidins, a phytochemical found in red wine, grapes, apples, blueberries, black currants, hazelnuts, pecans, and pistachios. The polyphenols found in kale and sprouts can also repair your lungs' alveoli and bronchioles, so a former smoker's diet should contain high amounts of these foods as well. When it comes to risk of smoking-related diseases such as esophageal and lung cancer and cardiovascular disease, Dr. William Lee's excellent book, Eat to Beat Disease, points out specific antioxidant-rich compounds that can lower the risk of these diseases, such as black raspberries, extra virgin olive oil, and of soy, such as miso, natto, and tempeh. In addition, one study examined the effects of drinking 4 cups of green tea per day on the stem cells and blood vessels of smokers, and noted a 43% increase in endothelial stem cells over 2 weeks, along with a 29% increase in vascular function. Once you give up smoking, your body will begin to respond immediately. 6 hours after quitting, circulating levels of the poisonous gas carbon monoxide will decline, and your heart won't have to work so hard to pump oxygen. Within 12 weeks, your lung function will significantly improve, and coughing, sinus congestion, shortness of breath, and fatigue levels will all decline. During this time frame, your lungs' hair-like cleaning structures called cilia will regrow, similar to the way that the intestinal cilia can become restored and renewed after you stop eating an inflammatory diet. After 3 months, your sexual performance will improve as testosterone levels normalize. After 9 months, your risk of heart and cardiovascular complications will fall. After 1 year, it will be like you never smoked, especially if you use the strategies above. Other dietary strategies that can help to reverse the effects of smoking include these. Foods high in vitamin E, like eggs, nuts, and dark leafy greens. Foods high in CoQ10, like salmon, beef, broccoli, and avocado. Vitamin C-rich foods that contain high amounts of bioflavonoids, like grapefruit, spinach, and citrus fruits, especially kiwi. Foods rich in vitamin B complex, like dark leafy greens, eggs, fish, and liver. A full-spectrum multivitamin rich in antioxidants. What did your ancestors eat? Ancestral dieting seems to have become quite sexy as of late. As we learn more about genetics and how diet is controlled by and impacts genetic expression, it seems to make sense that you should eat what your ancestors ate. After all, you've inherited a set of genes that developed and adapted to specific environments and diets, so it seems worth maximizing that genetic potential. For example, in my case, as someone from predominantly Northern European ancestry, I eat plenty of fermented foods, meats, fish, eggs, berries, and raw dairy, without a large intake of citrus fruits or other foods my ancestors would not have encountered in their local habitat. If you're of Scandinavian origins, your ancestors had good access to fish rich in omega-3s and vitamin D, so you likely need a diet higher in fish and vitamin D for optimal longevity. Certain genes can also influence these decisions. For example, MTHFR mutations that create a poor ability to methylate tend to cluster in regions and populations where a group's traditional diet was rich in folate. In a study of people in 16 different regions of the world, Mexicans, Hispanics, Italians, and Chinese were more likely than others to carry MTHFR mutations that increased the need for dietary folate. So if you have Chinese heritage, or your grandparents migrated from Italy, or your dad was Hispanic, you should probably eat more folate-rich foods, such as leafy greens, organ meats, and pastured egg yolks. Or take the AMY1 gene, which codes for salivary amylase production. Salivary amylase digests starch and carbohydrates, and the more AMY1 copies you have, the more salivary amylase you produce when you eat carbohydrates. The more likely it is that your ancestors ate relatively high amounts of starch, and the more likely it is that you can handle a slightly higher carbohydrate intake. Populations that are traditionally more agricultural, such as Japanese and continental Europeans, or populations that are high-starch foragers, such as the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, have all been shown to possess more AMY1 copies than populations that consume less starch, such as those in areas of Turkey and the Congo. If your ancestors came from a region that ate more carbohydrates, you can likely thrive on natural starches such as sweet potato, yam, plantain, other roots and tubers, fruit, and rice. One final example is the lactase persistence gene. Lactase is an enzyme that enables an adult to digest lactose without getting gut distress, diarrhea, and all the other mayhem that can happen with lactose intolerance. As you can imagine, cultures that have not traditionally raised dairy livestock, including those in Asia, Africa, and most of India, rarely carry the lactase persistence gene. In contrast, if you're of European descent, you're probably lactose tolerant. story is rather fascinating, isn't it? For an even deeper dive, I recommend reading Returning to an Ancestral Diet by Dr. Michael Smith and The Jungle Effect by Dr. Daphne Miller. Advanced Anti-Aging Biohacks and Strategies. While the daily practices above are incredibly important for a long life, the fact is that we live in an era in which those basic anti-aging tactics can now be combined with more advanced tactics and biohacks used by the longevity and anti-aging community. In this section, I'll offer more advanced tactics that you can implement for longevity, including some practical recommendations. Because many of the health, anti-aging, and longevity strategies I'm about to explore may seem, and often are, fringe, out of the ordinary, or even mildly excessive, allow me to clarify my take on the concept of implementing as many techniques as possible to enhance the quantity and quality of your years. I am not a transhumanist. I do not believe that immortality for its own sake is a noble pursuit, nor do I believe that we as humans are capable of attaining a perfect body or brain. I do not believe that grasping at straws to hang on to every last shred of life, especially when driven by a fear of death, is a healthy way to live. I've witnessed many colleagues, friends, and anti-aging industry leaders spend too much of their precious time biohacking their bodies to live longer, while simultaneously sacrificing time with their family and friends, a robust spiritual practice, and simple enjoyments, such as learning to play the harmonica or creating a beautiful watercolor painting, or gardening with their children. I am a Christian, and therefore I believe in a natural cycle of birth and death, followed by the ultimate resurrection of our bodies into a state of heavenly glory, unlike anything we would ever be able to accomplish here on earth. But importantly, I also believe that each and every person, including you, was born with a unique purpose, a set of skills, and calling, and that to achieve that purpose to the very best of your ability, you must equip yourself with a sound body and mind, and take steps to ensure that you don't come down with cancer when you're 50, or have a heart attack when you're 60, or lose your memory when you're 70 because you made poor decisions about your health earlier in life. In other words, the longer you're on this planet, the better able you are to fulfill your purpose in life, whether that's inspiring others to greatness, discovering the cure for cancer, making beautiful art, or writing books that delight children around the world. Furthermore, I believe that God has surrounded us human beings with wonders and mysteries in both the natural world and the scientific domains that allow us to engage in better living via a marriage of ancestral wisdom and modern science, and that to ignore our ability to garden, forage, and create new tinctures, capsules, oils, devices, machines, and techniques that allow us to live healthier and longer is to neglect a big part of what it means to be an intelligent human being who is far different from the rest of the animal kingdom. It is to neglect our unique ability to explore, to invent, and ultimately to create. So now that I'm off my soapbox, let's dive into some of those very discoveries, strategies, and inventions. Number 1. Longer-term fasting. I've already talked about time-restricted feeding and the other kinds of fasting protocols that fall into the intermittent fasting category, and all the reasons you may want to make fasting a daily practice. But for the purposes of overall wellness and longevity, I'm also a big fan of the following 2 longer-term fasting approaches. Feast-famine cycling. My friend, Dr. Dan Pompa, calls the ancient healing strategy of seasonal diet variation based on food availability a feast-famine cycle. Many ancient cultures and modern blue zones follow this kind of pattern of fasting and feasting. Humans have not always had grocery stores and Uber Eats services that provide food of all kinds 24/7. Instead, we've traditionally been forced to eat seasonally, according to what plants are in season, what animal protein is available, what nutrients are needed most at different times of the year. For example, in the winter, many Native American tribes would give their dogs the muscle meat and subsist themselves primarily on fats, especially the organ fat from the kidneys, liver, and gut, because what they cherished most was the caloric density of nutrients from the organs. In the summer, these same tribes would eat more roots and berries, prickly pears, beans, pods, mustard seeds, cola blossoms, acorn squash, pumpkins, and a variety of gourds, a much higher percentage of carbohydrates than in the winter when consumption of saturated fats reigned. In his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, Weston A. Price described this Native American practice this way. Quote, Native Americans cycle between the summer cultivation of starches and fruits and far greater reliance on fats from animals, particularly organ meats and marrow, during winter. The successful nutrition for 9 months of the year was largely limited to wild game, chiefly moose and caribou. During the summer months, the Indians were able to use growing plants. During the winter, some use was made of bark and buds of trees. I found the Indians putting great emphasis upon the eating of the organs of the animals, including the wall of parts of the digestive tract. These Indians obtained their fat-soluble vitamins and also most of their minerals from the organs of the animals. An important part of the nutrition of the children consisted in various preparations of bone marrow, both as a substitute for milk and a special dietary ration." Unquote. How it works. Science has shown that periods of caloric restriction and seasonal feast-famine dietary variations promoted health in indigenous cultures by forcing the body to use fat instead of glucose as a primary fuel during the winter months. This also gave the digestive system a rest and gave cells a chance to engage in the natural cell turnover known as autophagy. How to do it. Dr. Pompa's 5-1-1 strategy, which combines seasonal eating with cyclic ketosis, is a great place to start. For 5 days of the week, follow a lower-carb, ketogenic diet outlined in Chapter 13, or especially if you're attempting to lose weight, a calorie-restricted diet, primarily consisting of foods that are available locally and seasonally. 1 day of the week, fast for 24 hours, from dinner time to dinner time. The remaining day of the week, have a feast day, eating any of your favorite healthy food, especially carbohydrates. Add libitum until you're full. The 5-1-1 rule can be modified based on body fat, schedule, and physical activity levels. For some, a 4-2-1 or 2-2-3 approach works even better. Bonus points if you eat seasonally as you implement this approach, such as by eating more carbohydrates in the warmer months and more proteins and fats in the colder months. Fresh fruits and berries in the spring, tubers and squash in the fall, heavier cuts of meat and fermented foods in the winter, and so on. Fasting mimicking diet. Fasting usually involves abstaining from everything but water and perhaps black coffee and tea. No calories are consumed for the length of the fast. However, another effective approach to fasting was developed by Walter Longo and is outlined in detail in his book, The Longevity Diet, the Fasting Mimicking Diet. The Fasting Mimicking Diet, or FMD, allows you to fast while consuming a minimal number of calories, so you can supply your body with nutrients while getting the benefits of fasting. There are 2 ways you can implement an FMD. Alternate day modified fasting, which is eating minimal calories every other day for a 24-hour period. An extended FMD, which is the program Longo advocates in his book, and which involves consuming minimal calories for 5 consecutive days. As a word of caution, like other forms of intermittent fasting, an FMD may be harmful for people who already have little body fat, the elderly and children. How it works. A typical alternate day fast requires you to completely fast for a full 24 hours, then eat to satiety for the following 24 hours. It seems to be more effective than daily caloric restriction for maintaining long-term weight loss and allows your body to enter a powerful state of autophagy during the fasting stages. Fasting for longer periods, from 3 to 5 days, can stimulate adaptive responses such as autophagy, weight loss, and the long-term reduction of IGF-1, glucose, and markers of inflammation and aging. An FMD produces many of the same physiological effects as these kinds of fasts, but still provides your body with optimal nourishment without activating the pro-aging pathways, including the growth hormone, insulin, and insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1 pathways, which are activated by normal diets. When you follow an FMD, your body does not recognize that it's being fed, and so believes that it's in a period of fasting. This can strengthen the immune system by triggering it to replace old T cells to combat particular invasive microbes. It can also improve insulin sensitivity. How to do it. An FMD is low in calories and particularly low in protein. Longo's formula is based on meals of about 360 calories each. 9% from protein, 44% from fat, and 47% from carbohydrates. The diet is followed for 5 consecutive days. There are 3 meals on the first day that amount to a total of 1,090 calories, and 2 meals on each of the next 4 days, amounting to a total of 725 calories each day.